Europe has a center, a gravity well. For 2,000 years, whatever happened here decided the fate of the human race. If this center was weak, its neighbors tore it apart. If it was strong, it tore its neighbors apart. Today, we call it Germany. But for most of human history, Germany wasn't a country, it was an idea. The shifting, bleeding mosaic of hundreds of tiny kingdoms, dukedoms, bishoprics, and principalities. It was a battlefield where empires came to die, and where new worlds were violently born. How did a fragmented collection of tribes survive the Roman Empire, endure a millennium of holy wars, forge the world's most terrifying military machine, plunge the planet into two global catastrophes, and somehow rise from the ashes to become the economic engine of the modern world? This isn't just the history of a nation. This is the story of Europe's ultimate survivor. This is the history of Germany. Thousands of years ago, long before Germany existed as a nation, the land was covered in dense primeval forests, vast rivers, and scattered tribal settlements. Ancient Celtic tribes once dominated much of the southern and western regions, living in small agricultural communities, worshipping nature and developing sophisticated metallurgy. However, by the 1st century BC, aggressive Germanic tribes migrating from Scandinavia pushed southward, displacing the Celts and settling the vast territories. Between the Rhine and the Vistula rivers, everything changed when the mighty Roman Empire began expanding northward. Julius Caesar established the Rhine as Rome's natural border, constructing massive fortresses to keep the tribes at bay. To the civilized world of Rome, the lands beyond the Rhine were a living nightmare, Magna Germania. A trackless wilderness of endless bog, impenetrable marsh, and suffocating forest. The Romans viewed the people who lived here not as men, but as beasts, wild, towering barbarians who felt no pain and knew no law. For decades, Rome pushed its borders forward, built fortresses, and attempted to tame the wild. By the year 9 AD, Rome believed the province was secure. 3 elite legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, marched deep into the heart of the Teutoburg forest. They were led by Publius Quinctilius Varus, a man who treated the Germanic tribes with arrogant contempt. He imposed heavy taxes and Roman legal codes on a proud people. But Varus did not understand the woods, and he did not understand the man marching beside him, Arminius, a prince of the Cherusci tribe, taken to Rome as a boy hostage and educated in Latin. He was granted Roman citizenship and trained as an elite Roman cavalry officer. To Varus, Arminius was a loyal servant. To the tribes, Arminius was a secret messiah. He had spent months secretly uniting clans that had hated each other for generations. He united the Bructeri, Marsi, and Chatti under one banner. He lured Varus and his 20,000 men deep into a narrow bottleneck of mud and trees. The trap was set near modern-day Calcries, where the empire would face its greatest shadow. Then the rain started. For 3 days, in a torrential downpour that turned the forest floor into a swamp, the Germanic tribes hunted the legions. The Roman armor rusted, their wooden shields grew waterlogged and heavy, their bows grew useless from moisture. Their long, orderly baggage trains sank into the mud. From the safety of the tree line, utilizing hidden earthen ramparts, the tribes struck with brutal, terrifying guerrilla tactics. 15,000 Roman soldiers were slaughtered. Varus, seeing total defeat, fell upon his own sword to avoid capture. The standard bearers were killed, and the sacred golden eagle standards of the legions were captured. When Emperor Augustus received the news in Rome, he tore his clothes, let his hair and beard grow long for months, and reportedly banged his head against the palace walls, crying out into the night, "Varus, give me back my legions." Rome never pushed past the Rhine again. The Teutoburg forest became a permanent psychological wall. On one side, Latin civilization. On the other, the Germanic spirit, unbroken, untamed, and waiting. For centuries afterward, Germanic tribes remained divided but powerful. As population pressures grew and the Roman Empire weakened, tribes such as the Franks, Saxons, Goths, Vandals, and Alemanni spread across Europe in a massive migration period known as the Völkerwanderung. They battered the crumbling defenses of Rome, crossing the frozen Rhine in 406 AD. In 476 AD, the Germanic chieftain Otto overthrew the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, plunging Europe into the chaotic, fragmented period of the early Middle Ages. Out of the chaos of the Dark Ages emerged one of the most influential rulers in European history, Charlemagne, or Charles the Great. Inheriting the Frankish kingdom, he launched decades of brutal military campaigns to expand his empire across much of Western and Central Europe. His most ferocious war was against the pagan Saxons of northern Germany. For over 30 years, Charlemagne fought to conquer them, enforcing mass baptisms at the point of the sword and executing 4,500 Saxon rebels in a single day at the massacre of Verdun. On Christmas Day, in the year 800 AD, in St. Peter's Basilica in Rome, Pope Leo III placed a crown on Charlemagne's head, declaring him Emperor of the Romans. It was a grand illusion, a political attempt to resurrect a dead empire using Germanic blood. When Charlemagne died, his empire proved too vast to hold together. In 843 AD, his three grandsons signed the Treaty of Verdun, dividing the realm into three parts. The western half would eventually become France. The eastern half, the Kingdom of the East Franks, would become the geographical and cultural core of Germany. By 962 AD, this eastern kingdom transformed into the Holy Roman Empire when the German king Otto the Great was crowned emperor, having defended Europe from Magyar invasions at the Battle of Lechfeld. But don't let the grand name fool you. As Voltaire would later note, it was neither holy nor Roman nor an empire. It was a strange, sprawling, decentralized confederation. While France and England built centralized monarchies, Germany did the exact opposite. The German emperor was not born into power. He had to be elected by a small, elite group of powerful German princes and archbishops known as electors. This system was later formalized by the Golden Bull of 1356. To win their votes, every emperor had to sign concessions called Wahlkapitulationen, giving away royal lands, judicial rights, and tax revenues. The result? The central imperial government remained weak. While local princes became absolute rulers of their own tiny domains, Germany became a chaotic patchwork quilt of hundreds of microstates, duchies, bishoprics, free imperial cities, and knightly estates. Despite this political instability, medieval German lands flourished economically and culturally. The northern coastline saw the rise of the Hanseatic League, a powerful confederation of merchant guilds and market towns like Lübeck. The Hansa dominated trade across the Baltic and North Seas, building massive wealth that rivaled kingdoms. In the south, cities like Nuremberg and Augsburg became centers of global banking, craftsmanship, and commerce. Grand Gothic cathedrals, such as the one in Cologne, and formidable stone castles rose across the landscape, symbolizing an era of deep faith and fragmented territorial pride. But this pride was anchored to a religious unity that was about to shake Europe to its core. For 500 years, the only thing holding this chaotic mess of German states together was a shared religion, Roman Catholicism. But in the early 16th century, that final pillar of unity shattered. The spark was struck in 1517 in the small university town of Wittenberg. An obscure Augustinian monk and theology professor named Martin Luther had grown profoundly disgusted by the corruption of the Catholic Church. This corruption was embodied by the Dominican friar Johann Tetzel, who traveled through German lands selling indulgences. Tetzel's famous slogan was, "As soon as the coin in the coffer rings, the soul from purgatory springs." Luther took a hammer and nailed his 95 theses to the heavy wooden door of the All Saints Church in Wittenberg. Written in Latin, he intended them as an academic critique of church abuses. He didn't want to start a revolution, he wanted to reform his faith. But Luther possessed a weapon that no religious rebel before him had, the printing press, invented by Johannes Gutenberg. Within weeks, Luther's theses were translated into German, printed by the thousands, and distributed across Europe. Luther argued that salvation could not be bought. It was a free gift from God through faith alone, sola fide. He translated the Bible from ancient Greek and Hebrew into vernacular German, using the expressive language of the common people. In doing so, he standardized the German language itself, creating a unified grammar for a deeply disunified people. The Pope excommunicated Luther, branding him a heretic. In 1521, the young Holy Roman Emperor, Charles V, called Luther to the imperial diet in the city of Worms. Standing before the most powerful rulers in the world, the lonely monk refused, famously declaring, "Unless I am convinced by the testimony of the scriptures, I cannot and I will not recant anything. Here I stand, I can do no other. God help me. Amen." Luther's defiance split Germany in two. The northern princes embraced Protestantism, seizing wealthy Catholic church lands. The southern princes, led by Bavaria and Austria, remained fiercely Catholic. The German identity was now fractured along religious lines, and the stage was set for the apocalypse. In 1618, the long-simmering tensions boiled over into open slaughter. It began with an event known as the Defenestration of Prague, where Protestant noblemen threw Catholic imperial representatives out of a third-story window of Prague Castle. They survived by landing in a deep pile of horse manure, but the dignity of the empire was broken. What followed was the 30 Years' War, the most destructive conflict in European history before the world wars of the 20th century. It quickly ceased to be a simple war about religion and became a brutal, cynical struggle for European supremacy. Foreign empires used Germany as their sandbox. Swedish armies under King Gustavus Adolphus marched from the north. Catholic French armies struck from the west to weaken their Habsburg rivals. Spanish and Austrian imperial troops ravaged from the south and east. Germany became a charnel house. Armies consisted mostly of mercenaries who were paid not in coin, but in the right to plunder. Military commanders like Albrecht von Wallenstein developed the doctrine of war feeds war, meaning armies sustained themselves by stripping bare the territories they occupied. They swept across the German countryside like swarms of locusts, burning villages, torturing peasants for their hidden food, and slaughtering livestock. Cannibalism became rampant in the ruined countryside. Disease, specifically typhus, dysentery, and the bubonic plague, followed the armies and killed more than the sword. By the time the war finally ended in 1648 with the Peace of Westphalia, the human cost was unfathomable. Some regions of Germany, particularly Mecklenburg, Pomerania, and the Palatinate, had lost over 50 to 60% of their population. Overall, more than 7 million Germans were dead. The Holy Roman Empire was reduced to a hollow ghost, its central power utterly destroyed, as the treaty granted near-total sovereignty to each of the 300 individual German states. The fields were black, the cities were empty, and the psychological trauma of this catastrophe would haunt the German mindset for centuries. It left behind a deep, primal craving for order, security, and defense at any cost. Out of the ashes of the 30 Years' War, a new power began to rise from a place no one expected. Northeast Germany, a cold, swampy, infertile region known as Brandenburg Prussia. Its soil was so poor, it was mockingly called the sandbox of the Holy Roman Empire. It had no natural borders, no mountains, no wide rivers to protect it from its powerful neighbors, Sweden and Poland. It had been utterly devastated. But Prussia had a line of rulers from the House of Hohenzollern who possessed a fanatical clarity of purpose. If geography did not give them a shield, they would build one out of human flesh. The transformation began with Frederick William, the Great Elector, who realized that a small state could only survive if it possessed a standing army. His grandson, King Frederick William III, known as the Soldier King, turned this idea into an obsession. He spent his reign from 1713 to 1740 hoarding money, drilling troops, and building an army disproportionate to his country's population. He hated luxury, wore a military uniform every day, and created a society where everything was subordinated to the needs of the military. He even created a legendary personal regiment called the Potsdam Giants, recruiting or kidnapping exceptionally tall soldiers from across Europe. Prussia was famously described not as a country that had an army, but as an army that possessed a country. The entire nobility, the Junkers, were forced into the officer corps, tying their loyalty directly to the crown. Absolute obedience, iron discipline, and bureaucratic efficiency became the Prussian state religion. In 1740, the Soldier King died, leaving this magnificent military machine to his son, Frederick II, who would go down in history as Frederick the Great. As a youth, Frederick had loved French literature, poetry, philosophy, and the flute. His brutal father had despised him for it, viewing him as weak, and had even forced Frederick to watch the decapitation of his best friend. But when Frederick took the throne, the poet vanished, and the ruthless military genius emerged. Within months of becoming king, Frederick saw a moment of weakness in Austria, ruled by a young woman, Maria Theresa. Without warning, Frederick marched his Prussian army into Silesia, Austria's richest economic province, and seized it. Maria Theresa spent the next 2 decades trying to reclaim her land, culminating in the 7 Years' War from 1756 to 1763. Prussia found itself surrounded by an alliance of the greatest powers in Europe: Austria, France, Russia, and Sweden. Prussia was outnumbered 10-1. Frederick fought with brilliant aggressive tactics, moving his smaller army rapidly along internal lines to strike his enemies before they could combine. By 1762, Prussia was exhausted, its treasury empty, Berlin plundered twice, and Frederick was carrying a vial of poison in his pocket. Then came the miracle of the House of Brandenburg. The Empress of Russia died suddenly. Her successor, Tsar Peter III, was a fanatical admirer of Frederick. He immediately pulled Russia out of the war and returned all conquered lands. Prussia had survived. It was now recognized as a European superpower, and the duel for the ultimate control of Germany had begun. While Prussia grew as a military power, German culture experienced an extraordinary golden age in quiet university towns and royal courts. Thinkers like Immanuel Kant transformed human philosophy with his critique of pure reason, arguing for human autonomy and reason. Composers like Bach perfected Baroque counterpoint, while Beethoven revolutionized classical music into an expression of intense emotion. Writers like Goethe wrote Faust, and Schiller penned poems of liberty that elevated German literature to global heights. But politically, the German lands remained fragmented. More than 300 separate states still existed within the decaying Holy Roman Empire. The fragile old order finally collapsed in 1806, when the French Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Germany and crushed the vaunted Prussian army. Following the Battle of Jena-Auerstedt, Napoleon dissolved the Holy Roman Empire and reduced the German states to a puppet confederation called the Rhine. Many Germans felt deeply humiliated by French domination, but Napoleon's conquest also sparked something new and dangerous: German nationalism. For the first time, people didn't just view themselves as Prussians or Bavarians. They realized that because they were divided, they were weak. During the Wars of Liberation in 1813, volunteer soldiers marched against Napoleon, wearing black coats with red trim and brass gold buttons. When Napoleon was defeated, the Congress of Vienna in 1815 created the German Confederation, a loose alliance of 39 states dominated by Austria. In 1848, a wave of liberal revolutions swept across Germany. Intellectuals and workers gathered at the Paulskirche in Frankfurt, creating a parliament. They offered the crown to the Prussian king, Frederick William IV. But he refused, stating he would not accept a crown from the gutter. The question remained: who would lead a unified Germany? Austria with its vast empire, or Prussia with its cold, efficient military dominance? In 1862, the new Prussian King Wilhelm I appointed a man who would decisively answer that question: Otto von Bismarck. Bismarck was a political mastermind, a practitioner of realpolitik, the politics of cold, calculating realism, completely devoid of sentimentality or abstract morality. In his first speech to Parliament, he laid down his core philosophy: the great questions will be resolved by iron and blood. Bismarck knew he had to eliminate Austria from German affairs and provoke a war with France to force the southern states to join Prussia. He engineered his plan with precision. First, he allied with Austria to defeat Denmark in 1864, seizing the duchies of Schleswig and Holstein. Then he turned on Austria in 1866. The modern Prussian army, utilizing breech-loading needle guns, crushed the Austrians at the Battle of Königgrätz. Bismarck deliberately offered Austria a lenient peace treaty. He didn't want them as a permanent enemy, he just wanted them out. Finally, in 1870, Bismarck edited the Ems dispatch to make it look like the king had insulted the French ambassador. The French public fell into a patriotic rage, and Emperor Napoleon III foolishly declared war on Prussia. It was exactly what Bismarck wanted. The southern German states, fearing invasion, threw themselves into a military alliance with Prussia. The unified German armies surged across the border, surrounded the main French army at Sedan, and captured Napoleon III himself. On January 18, 1871, inside the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, the German Empire was officially proclaimed. Wilhelm I of Prussia was crowned German Emperor, the Kaiser. A massive superpower had been violently born in the heart of Europe. The fragmented mosaic was gone. In its place stood the Second Reich, industrialized, heavily militarized, and ready to dominate the world. The new Germany rapidly transformed into an industrial giant. Between 1871 and 1914, the country underwent a massive economic explosion known as the Gründerzeit. Factories expanded exponentially across the Ruhr Valley, Silesia, and Berlin. Railroads connected every city, and coal and steel production exploded, quickly surpassing France and rivaling Great Britain. German engineering, chemistry, and science became world famous. Companies like Krupp manufactured massive steel artillery, Siemens dominated electrical engineering, and Bayer and BASF led the world in chemical discoveries and pharmaceuticals. German universities and laboratories drove innovation, winning more Nobel Prizes in science than any other nation. To maintain internal stability against the rising working class, Bismarck implemented a dual strategy. He banned socialist organizations, but simultaneously created the world's first modern welfare state, introducing national health care, accident insurance, and old age pensions. Germany soon rivaled Britain as Europe's strongest industrial economy, but rapid growth also fueled geopolitical ambition. Germany sought colonies overseas in Africa and the Pacific, built a massive high-seas navy to challenge the British Royal Navy, and intensified tensions with other European powers. Bismarck had built a masterpiece of power politics, but it was a terrifyingly complex machine that required a genius to operate. Bismarck knew that Germany was now a giant, surrounded by fearful neighbors. For 20 years, he worked tirelessly to keep Europe at peace, weaving a complex web of secret alliances to keep France isolated and ensure Germany would never face a war on two fronts. But in 1888, a young, arrogant, and deeply insecure man ascended the throne, Kaiser Wilhelm II. Born with a withered left arm, Wilhelm overcompensated by adopting a hyper-masculine, aggressive military persona. He grew tired of Bismarck's cautious defensive diplomacy. In 1890, the young Kaiser fired the old Iron Chancellor. Wilhelm wanted Germany to have its place in the sun. He abandoned the secret reinsurance treaty with Russia, forcing Russia straight into the arms of France. He launched a massive naval build-up to challenge Great Britain's dominance of the seas, forcing the British into an alliance with France and Russia. Within 15 years, Germany had completely isolated itself. Europe was divided into two armed camps, waiting for a single spark. That spark came on June 28, 1914 in Sarajevo, with the assassination of the Austrian Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Austria declared war on Serbia. Russia mobilized to protect Serbia. Germany gave Austria a blank check, promising total military support. The dominoes fell with terrifying speed. By August, the First World War had begun. Germany's war plan, the Schlieffen Plan, was a gamble of absolute desperation. It called for a rapid knockout blow against France, before turning around to face the slow-moving Russian colossus in the east. The plan failed. The British entered to defend Belgian neutrality. The French held the line at the Battle of the Marne. The war of rapid movement degenerated into a horrific static nightmare of trench warfare. For 4 years, a generation of German youth was chewed to pieces by machine guns and choked by chlorine and mustard gas, and obliterated by industrial artillery at places like Verdun and the Somme. At home, the British naval blockade starved the German population, leaving over 750,000 civilians to die of malnutrition. By late 1918, the German military machine had ground to a halt. The entry of the United States had brought endless fresh resources. Germany's economy was shattered, its people were rioting, and the Navy mutinied at Kiel. On November 9, 1918, Kaiser Wilhelm II abdicated his throne and fled into exile in the Netherlands. 2 days later, in a railway car in the forest of Compiègne, German representatives signed an armistice. The Second Reich was dead. Out of the ashes of defeat, Germany stumbled into democracy. A new government was formed in the quiet city of Weimar, away from the revolutionary chaos of Berlin. The Weimar Republic was born. But this democracy was poisoned from its very first breath. The victorious Allies forced the new German government to sign the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. It was a document of unmitigated vengeance. Under Article 231, Germany was forced to accept 100% of the blame for starting the war. The nation was stripped of 13% of its European territory, including Alsace-Lorraine and the Polish corridor, losing millions of citizens. Its military was restricted to a skeleton force of 100,000 men, with no tanks, submarines or air force allowed. Finally, it was hit with astronomical financial reparations that it could never hope to pay, fixed at 132 billion gold marks. Many Germans felt deeply humiliated and betrayed. Right-wing nationalists and bitter military officers manufactured a toxic myth, the stab-in-the-back myth. They claimed that the heroic German army had not been defeated on the battlefield. It had been stabbed in the back by a traitorous cabal. The Weimar Republic was forced to manage a broken nation while being despised by both the radical left and the radical right. In 1923, the economic system completely collapsed. French and Belgian troops occupied the Ruhr Valley to seize goods by force. In response, the German government simply printed money to pay wages. The result was hyperinflation on a cosmic scale. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January 1923 cost 200 billion marks by November of that year. People carried cash in wheelbarrows just to buy a coffee. Banknotes were used as wallpaper or kites by children. Housewives burned stacks of paper money in their stoves because it lasted longer than firewood. Life savings vanished in 48 hours. Though Germany briefly stabilized in the mid-1920s, the fragile peace shattered in 1929 with the Wall Street crash. The Great Depression hit Germany harder than any other nation. Millions lost their jobs overnight, with unemployment soaring past 6 million. Poverty, starvation, and hopelessness flooded the streets. Middle-class Germans looked desperately for a savior, someone who could restore order. The descent into madness. They found him in a radical Austrian-born veteran of the Western Front, an orator who possessed a hypnotic, terrifying ability. He channeled the rage, fear, and resentment of the German people into a single emotion: hatred. Adolf Hitler. Hitler's National Socialist German Workers' Party, the Nazis, promised everything to everyone. To the unemployed, they promised work and bread. To the industrialists, they promised to crush unions. To the nationalists, they promised to rip up the Treaty of Versailles and make Germany feared again. They gave a fractured people a scapegoat for all their misery, the Jewish population and international Marxism. In the chaotic elections of the early 1930s, the Nazi vote surged from 2% in 1928 to over 37% in 1932. On January 30, 1933, conservative politicians convinced the aging President Paul von Hindenburg to appoint Hitler as Chancellor. It was the fatal mistake of German history. Within a month, the Reichstag building was set on fire. Hitler used the panic to sign the Reichstag Fire Decree, suspending civil liberties, and passed the Enabling Act, giving him absolute dictatorial power. The Weimar Republic was dead. The Third Reich had begun. What followed was a swift, total descent into totalitarian madness. All political parties except the Nazis were banned. When Hindenburg died in 1934, Hitler declared himself Führer, the absolute leader. Hitler then turned Germany's industrial capacity toward a single goal: total war. He rearmed the military in open defiance of the Versailles Treaty. Britain and France adopted a policy of appeasement as Hitler annexed Austria and tore apart Czechoslovakia. But Hitler could not be appeased. On September 1, 1939, German tanks surged across the Polish border. The Second World War had begun. For the first 2 years, the reconstituted German army unleashed blitzkrieg, lightning war, upon the world. Using a revolutionary combination of concentrated panzer tank divisions, motorized infantry, and devastating air support from Stuka dive bombers, Germany tore Europe to pieces. Poland fell in weeks. Denmark, Norway, Belgium, and the Netherlands were overwhelmed. France collapsed in just 6 weeks in 1940. The British were driven off the continent at Dunkirk. By 1941, Nazi swastika flags flew from the Atlantic coast of France to Moscow. Germany had achieved total hegemony over the European continent. But beneath the surface of military triumphs lay an unfathomable horror. Behind the advancing front lines marched the Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing squads. In the dense forests and ravines, they systematically shot millions into mass graves. By 1942, at the Wannsee Conference, the Nazi leadership organized the industrialization of mass murder. They built an empire of extermination camps in occupied Poland: Auschwitz-Birkenau, Treblinka, Belzec, Sobibor. This was the Holocaust, the Shoah. 6 million Jews, along with millions of others, were systematically transported in cattle cars from across Europe. They were gassed in disguised shower rooms and reduced to ash. It was an unprecedented crime in human history. The entire scientific and industrial apparatus of a modern state used to systematically exterminate an entire ethnic group. But the hubris of the Third Reich had already sealed its doom. By invading the Soviet Union in June 1941 and declaring war on the United States, Hitler forced Germany into a total war of attrition. The turning point arrived in the frozen, blood-soaked ruins of Stalingrad in the winter of 1942-1943. The German Sixth Army was surrounded and annihilated by the Red Army. From that moment, the war was a slow retreat. By 1944, Germany was caught in a vice. The Western Allies landed in Normandy on D-Day, opening a second front. While the Soviet steamroller advanced relentlessly from the east, British and American bombers rained explosives onto German cities. Historic cultural centers like Cologne, Hamburg, and Dresden were turned into raging firestorms. Hitler refused to surrender, ordering children as young as 12 and old men into the frontline trenches. In April 1945, the Red Army entered Berlin, fighting block by block through the smoking ruins. On April 30th, deep inside his underground bunker, Adolf Hitler shot himself. 1 week later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The Third Reich, which Hitler promised would last 1,000 years, had collapsed in just 12, leaving behind a continent in ruins. May 1945. Germany was gone. It was no longer a state. It was a geographic area occupied by 4 foreign armies: the United States, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union. This was Stunde Null, Hour Zero. The physical destruction was absolute. Berlin, Munich, Frankfurt, and Hamburg were mountains of millions of cubic meters of rubble. Bridges were shattered, railways were obliterated, factories were stripped of machinery, and millions of people were homeless, starving, and wandering the landscape. Millions of German soldiers were in prison camps. Millions more were dead or missing. Over 12 million German civilians were violently expelled from Eastern Europe, from Silesia, Pomerania, and East Prussia, fleeing westward with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Amidst the ruins, teams of women known as the Trümmerfrauen, rubble women, spent years clearing the debris by hand, sorting bricks to rebuild their cities. As the horrific images of the liberated concentration camps were broadcast to the world, and as the Nuremberg trials exposed the systematic atrocities of the Nazi regime, the German people had to confront an existential realization. They were not only physically ruined, they were morally bankrupt. Their culture, their history, their pride, everything had been weaponized to create an engine of absolute evil. As the smoke cleared, the fragile wartime alliance between the Western democracies and the Soviet Union dissolved into the Cold War. Germany became ground zero for this new global struggle. In 1948, the Soviets attempted to starve the western sectors of Berlin by cutting off all land access. The United States and Britain responded with the Berlin airlift, flying in millions of tons of food and coal for 11 months until the Soviets lifted the blockade. In 1949, the country was formally split into 2 separate states. In the West, The United States, Britain and France merged their occupation zones to create the Federal Republic of Germany, BRD, a capitalist parliamentary democracy with its capital in Bonn. In the east, the Soviet Union established the German Democratic Republic, DDR, a communist totalitarian satellite state ruled by the Socialist Unity Party, SED, under the watchful eye of Moscow. The city of Berlin, sitting deep inside the communist East, was also split in half. For 12 years, West Berlin remained an island of freedom behind the Iron Curtain. Between 1949 and 1961, over 2.5 million East Germans, desperate to escape economic stagnation and the oppressive surveillance of the East German secret police, the Stasi, fled into West Berlin. To stop this catastrophic brain drain, the East German regime acted in the dead of night. On August 13, 1961, barbed wire was strung across the center of Berlin. Over the coming years, it evolved into the Berlin Wall, a concrete monstrosity over 100 kilometers long, fortified with landmines, attack dogs, watchtowers, and automatic firing systems. East German border guards were given strict orders to shoot anyone attempting to cross. Over 140 people were killed trying to escape past the wall, which became one of the most powerful and painful symbols of the Cold War. Yet out of this profound tragedy emerged two distinct miracles. In the West, there was the Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle. Under the leadership of Economics Minister Ludwig Erhard, and aided by the American financial injections of the Marshall Plan, West Germany embraced a social market economy, Sozialmarktwirtschaft. They combined free market capitalism with a powerful social safety net. The results were astonishing. Within a decade, the ruins vanished. Clean, modern cities rose from the ash. German factories began pumping out precision machinery, high-end electronics, and automobiles under brands like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz. To meet labor shortages, Germany signed guest worker, Gastarbeiter agreements, bringing millions of workers from Italy, Greece, and especially Turkey, changing the cultural fabric of the nation. By the late 1950s, West Germany possessed the strongest economy in Europe, less than 15 years after total annihilation. But there was a second, far more important miracle: the moral rehabilitation of the nation. Beginning in the late 1960s, a new generation of Germans came of age. They began asking their parents uncomfortable, agonizing questions about what they did during the war. West Germany did something unique in global history. Instead of burying its historic crimes, it forced itself to remember them. They developed a concept known as Vergangenheitsbewältigung, the process of coming to terms with the past. They built monuments to their victims in the center of their capital. They made Holocaust denial illegal. They paid billions in reparations to survivors and the State of Israel. In 1970, Chancellor Willy Brandt pursued Ostpolitik, a policy of normalizing relations with Eastern Europe. During a visit to the Warsaw Ghetto Monument in Poland, the leader of Germany spontaneously dropped to his knees on the cold, wet stone before the memorial to the Jewish victims of the Nazi regime. That quiet gesture, the Kniefall von Warschau, spoke louder than 1,000 speeches. Germany was showing the world that it had truly changed. By the late 1980s, the communist bloc was fracturing under economic rot and the liberalizing reforms of Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. In East Germany, hundreds of thousands of ordinary citizens found their courage, taking to the streets in peaceful mass demonstrations, chanting a simple, powerful slogan, "Wir sind das Volk." We are the people. On the evening of November 9, 1989, an East German official named Günter Schabowski blundered during a live televised press conference, stating that travel restrictions to the West would be lifted immediately, effective, as far as he knew, aviso, without delay. Within minutes, tens of thousands of East Berliners surged toward the border checkpoints along the wall. The guards, confused, overwhelmed, and lacking orders from a paralyzed leadership, chose not to open fire and opened the gates. Thousands of people poured through, met by ecstatic crowds of West Berliners. People wept, hugged, danced on top of the concrete wall, and hacked away at the stone with hammers and chisels. The wall had fallen without a single shot being fired. On October 3, 1990, Less than a year later, Germany was officially reunited, a process engineered by Chancellor Helmut Kohl. The long division was over. If you enjoyed this documentary, please support the channel by liking, sharing, and commenting below. And if you love in-depth history content, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for more documentaries like this. Now, let's conclude the story of Germany. Modern Germany faced enormous structural challenges after reunification. The former East struggled economically. Thousands of state-owned factories closed, leading to high unemployment and mass migration to the West. Infrastructure needed massive rebuilding, funded by a dedicated solidarity tax. Social and psychological differences between those raised under communism and capitalism, the so-called wall in the mind, remained. Gradually, Germany integrated the two regions. Today, Germany stands as the undisputed leader and economic engine of the European Union. It is an economic titan, a global hub of technology, sustainable energy transition, energy vendor, and industrial manufacturing. But it remains a nation defined by a deep, inherent paradox. It is a global power that remains profoundly uncomfortable with military force, often pursuing a foreign policy of restraint. It is a country whose modern identity is explicitly constructed not on myths of ancient glory, but on the painful, honest remembrance of its darkest sins. They wear their scars openly, not out of self-loathing, but as a protective shield against the return of the monsters that once consumed them. From the dark, misty forests of Arminius, through the catastrophic fires of the 30 Years' War, from the iron and blood of Bismarck to the horrific abyss of the Third Reich, and from the complete destruction of Hour Zero to the triumphant rebirth of a peaceful democracy, Germany has been torn down, rebuilt, redefined, and resurrected. The center of Europe holds. It is no longer a vacuum waiting to be plundered, nor is it an aggressive empire seeking to conquer. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a nation that proved that borders can change, empires can fall, and cities can burn to ash, but a people can always choose to step out of the dark and rebuild. Whatever happens next in Germany will write the future of the world. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this documentary, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And here's a question for you: what topic should we explore next? Tell me in the comments below, and the most requested subject could be featured in an upcoming documentary.